Before humans built cities, before writing, before farming, and long before metal, the story of tools began with something very small. A hard object held in the hand, placed between the body and the world. The title asks a simple question, but it reaches very far back. What counted as a tool before there were names for tools? Was it a stone used to break something open, a sharp edge found or shaped for cutting, a stick used to reach farther than the arm, or a fragment of bone used because fingers were not enough? The earliest tools were not inventions in the modern sense. They were quiet answers to hunger, danger, distance, and the limits of the human body. But if we follow those traces back into deep time, where does the first tool truly begin, and what were the first tools humans ever made? Before humans built cities, before writing, before farming, and long before metal, the story of tools began with something very small. A hard object held in the hand, placed between the body and the world. The title asks a simple question, but it reaches very far back. What counted as a tool before there were names for tools? Was it a stone used to break something open, a sharp edge found or shaped for cutting, a stick used to reach farther than the arm, or a fragment of bone used because fingers were not enough? The earliest tools were not inventions in the modern sense. They were quiet answers to hunger, danger, distance, and the limits of the human body. But if we follow those traces back into deep time, where does the first tool truly begin? And what were the first tools humans ever made? To begin gently, we have to imagine a world where the body met every problem directly. A hand could pull, grip, press and tear, but only within the strength of skin, muscle, and bone. Teeth could bite, but they could not open every shell, split every hard surface, or cut every fibre cleanly. Fingernails could scrape, but they were not claws. Arms could reach, but only so far. In that older world, before the familiar signs of civilization, the simplest tool may have been anything that allowed a living body to do a little more than the body alone could do. A stone in the hand could add weight. A sharp edge could add a new kind of contact. A stick could lengthen the arm. A piece of bone could press into a narrow place where fingers could not fit. None of these objects needed to look advanced. None needed decoration, symmetry, or a name. Their importance was not in how impressive they appeared, but in what happened when they stood between a soft body and a resistant world. This is why the first tools are difficult to picture. Modern people often imagine tools as finished objects: a knife, a hammer, a needle, a bowl, a machine. But the earliest tools may have been much closer to ordinary nature. They may have looked like things already lying on the ground. A stone could be both a stone and a tool, depending on whether it was held, chosen, carried, struck, or used against something else. A branch could be only a fallen branch, or it could become a way to dig, reach, push, or test a place before the hand entered it. A bone left from an animal could be waste in one moment, then a hard point, scraper, or lever in another. The beginning of tools may not have been a sudden leap into invention. It may have been a slow widening of what the body could borrow from the world. Still, we have to be careful. We cannot look directly into the first moment when this happened. We do not have the first hand, the first choice, or the first use. Archaeology gives us traces, and traces are always incomplete. Stone survives far better than wood, leaves, skin, fibre, or many kinds of bone. So the oldest tools we can find are not necessarily the oldest tools that ever existed. They are often the oldest tools that the earth was able to preserve. That small distinction matters because it keeps the story honest. The first tools known from durable evidence may be stone, but the first tools in lived experience could have included many simpler materials that disappeared long ago. For the listener following this question into deep time, the answer begins not with one perfect object, but with a small family of possibilities: stones that added force, edges that could separate material, sticks that extended reach, bones that gave hardness to the hand, and natural objects that helped early humans and their relatives face tasks their bodies could not easily manage alone. The first tools, then, were not just things. They were early bridges between weakness and adaptation, between bare touch and shaped contact, between the animal body and a world that could slowly be handled in new ways. Ancient. To see the first tools clearly, it helps to slow the question down and let each object remain ordinary for a moment. A stone is only a stone until a hand gives it a task. A stick is only a fallen piece of wood until it reaches where the arm cannot. A bone is only a remnant until its hardness is used against another surface. This is the quiet beginning of tool history, not a world suddenly filled with inventions, but a world in which certain objects began to answer certain limits. The earliest useful things may have been so simple that no one walking across the same ground today would recognize them as the beginning of anything. They may have been picked up, used, dropped, and lost without leaving a clear mark. Yet the pattern behind them is important. A tool begins when the body stops meeting the world alone. The hand still matters. The eye still matters. Strength still matters. But now, something else stands between flesh and resistance. A hard stone takes the pain that would have gone into the knuckles. A sharp fragment does the separating that teeth and nails could only do roughly. A stick tests a hidden place before skin is risked. A bone edge enters a gap too narrow for fingers. These are not dramatic scenes. They are small adjustments. But small adjustments, repeated across long stretches of time, can become the foundation of an entire way of living. This is also why the first tools must be understood as a group of functions, not as a single famous object. One early tool may have helped with force. Another may have helped with cutting. Another may have helped with reaching, digging, scraping, carrying, or holding things together. They'll prove it. The first tool world was likely not divided into neat categories. A stone could be a pounder in one moment and a surface for breaking in another. A stick could be a probe, a digging aid, a support, or a way to move something unpleasant or dangerous. A sharp edge could cut plant material, scrape a surface, or open something that bare hands could not open well. Later, human history would give tools clearer forms and names, but the beginning was probably more flexible. The object did not need to belong to a fixed type. It needed to work. In that sense, the first tools were not just early technology. They were early choices about material. Stone, wood, bone, shell, and fibre each offered a different kind of help. Stone was durable and hard, which is why it remains so visible to archaeology. Wood was common and useful, but often vanished unless buried in rare conditions. Bone and shell sometimes survived, but not always clearly enough to show how they were used. Fibre was perhaps one of the most important materials later in human life, because tying and binding allow separate things to become one working object, yet fibre is among the easiest things for time to erase. This means the beginning of tools is partly visible and partly missing. The stones left behind may be the clearest witnesses, but they do not stand alone. Around them, there may once have been many other objects that disappeared into soil, water, insects, weather, and decay. For a sleep audio journey, this is where the question becomes calmer, but deeper. The first tools were probably not impressive because they were complex. They were important because they changed the relationship between the body and the world. They helped early humans and their relatives press harder, cut cleaner, reach farther, open tougher materials, and carry or connect more than the unaided body could manage. They also began a pattern that continued through every later age. A digging stick leads, in a distant sense, toward farming tools. A sharp flake leads toward knives, scrapers and blades. A heavy stone leads toward hammers and grinding stones. A strip of fibre leads toward nets, baskets, clothing, shelters, and eventually countless joined objects. The first tools were not the whole story, but they contained the first shape of the story. The human body surrounded by materials, learning slowly that the world itself could be used to answer the body's limits. The first tools we can speak about with the most confidence are often stone tools, not because stone was certainly the first material ever used, but because stone is patient. Wood rots, fibre disappears, skin, leaves, and many fragile materials return to the earth. Stone can remain for an almost unimaginable length of time, carrying small marks of impact, fracture, and used long after the hands that held it are gone. This is why the earliest visible doorway into human toolmaking is often a scatter of stones, not grand objects, not polished blades, not elegant instruments, but heavy pieces, broken pieces, sharp pieces, and the small debris left behind when one stone was struck against another. To a modern eye, these objects may look plain. Some may look almost accidental. But in archaeology, A stone can begin to speak when its broken surfaces show a pattern that nature alone is unlikely to repeat in the same way. A hammerstone is one of the simplest things to imagine. It is a stone chosen because it fits the hand well enough and carries enough weight to strike. It does not need to have a handle. It does not need to be carved into a perfect shape. Its power comes from hardness and mass. When held in the hand, it turns a movement of the arm into a heavier force. It can pound, break, crush, or strike another stone to detach a flake. In this sense, the hammerstone is not only a tool for doing work directly, it can also be a tool for making other tools. That small fact matters. A stone used to strike another stone suggests a step beyond simply picking up a useful object. It suggests that the useful object can lead to another useful object, that one material can be used to change another material before the real task even begins. Then there is the core, the stone mass from which flakes have been removed. A core may not look as sharp or delicate as the pieces taken from it, but it holds the memory of repeated blows. Each scar on its surface can show where a flake once came away. The core is like a quiet record of action. It tells us that stone was not always used as it was found. It could be struck, turned, struck again, and changed little by little. The flakes are often the pieces that seem most directly useful. A flake can have a thin, sharp edge created by fracture. That edge may cut or scrape better than a rounded stone. It may work on plant fibers, hide, meat, bark, or other materials, depending on the situation and on what traces remain. We should be careful not to assign every flake a single job. In deep time, one sharp edge could have many possible uses, and not every use leaves a clear mark. Still, the basic importance of a flake is easy to understand. It gives the hand a sharp line, something the human body does not naturally possess. Teeth are inside the mouth. Fingernails are weak compared with claws. But a flake brings sharpness into the hand, where it can be aimed, turned, pressed, and controlled. These three forms, hammerstone, core, and flake, help answer the title in a grounded way. Some of the first tools humans and their relatives made were not complicated machines. They were stones used for impact, stones used as sources of sharp fragments, and sharp fragments themselves. Yet even this simple group contains a deep change. A hammerstone adds force, a core shows preparation, a flake adds edge. Together, they reveal a world where the body was beginning to work with matter in stages. First choose the stone, then strike the stone, then use the broken edge. This does not mean every early toolmaker planned far ahead in a modern sense, and it does not require us to imagine words, teaching, or fully formed ideas that we cannot prove. The evidence is more modest and more powerful than that. It shows repeated physical action. It shows that hard materials were selected and changed. It shows that the body was learning through hand and eye that stone could be more than something lying on the ground. It could become weight, edge, surface, and memory. The earliest stone tools may look small beside later human inventions, but they mark one of the first visible ways the human story began to move beyond the limits of skin and bone. A hammerstone, a core, and a flake may sound like simple names, but together they show a chain of work that is deeper than any one object. The hammerstone is the tool of force. The core is the stone being changed. The flake is the thin piece released from that change, often carrying an edge sharper than the rounded stone from which it came. This chain matters because it shows that some of the earliest visible tools were not only used directly against the world, they could also be used to prepare other tools before the main task began. A hand could hold one stone, strike another, and bring out an edge that was not visible before. The edge was hidden inside the stone until force, angle, and fracture revealed it. To modern eyes, this may seem small, almost too simple to call technology, but in deep human history, this was a quiet shift. The body was no longer only choosing objects from the ground. It was beginning to alter those objects, making them more useful than they had been when found. The core helps us see this especially well. It is not always the most elegant object, and it is not always the tool people imagine when they think of the first inventions. Yet a core carries the marks of removal. A flake scar is a negative shape, a missing piece. It shows where stone once separated from stone. One scar might be accidental. Many scars, arranged through repeated blows, begin to suggest a pattern of action. This is one reason stone tools are so important to archaeology. They do not preserve thoughts. They do not preserve voices. They do not tell us what early humans or their relatives believed they were doing, but they can preserve a record of movement. Strike, turn, strike again, detach, use, discard. The flake then becomes the object most directly connected to fine contact. A heavy stone changes force, but a flake changes precision. Its edge can enter places a blunt object cannot. It can separate material instead of merely crushing it. It can scrape a surface in a more controlled way. It can make a cut where teeth would be awkward and fingernails too weak. This does not mean every early flake was a knife in the modern sense. That would be too narrow and too confident. A sharp stone fragment could serve many purposes, depending on the need, the material, and the hand using it. Some may have been used briefly. Some may have been carried. Some may have been left where they fell after the work was done. What matters is that the flake gave the hand a new contact with the world, a thin edge outside the body, directed by the body. Around these stones, there were also likely other simple stone forms that helped with daily tasks. Some stones may have served as anvils, stable surfaces against which other things could be cracked or broken. A hard nut, a bone, a shell, or another stone could be placed on a surface and struck from above. In that arrangement, one stone holds still while another moves. The body no longer provides all the resistance itself. The ground, the anvil stone, and the striking stone become a small working system. Later, human history would fill the world with complex workspaces, benches, hearths, grinding surfaces, workshops and machines. But the older pattern is already visible in a very plain form. One object held, one object struck, one surface receiving force. The first stone tools also remind us that early technology was not always beautiful. It did not need to be. A flake did not have to look balanced to be useful. A hammerstone did not need a perfect shape if it fit the hand and struck well. A core did not need to be kept forever, if enough sharp pieces had already been taken from it. Usefulness could be temporary. A tool could be made, used, and left behind. That is very different from the way modern people often think about possessions. Today, tools are named, bought, stored, repaired, and passed from one place to another. In deep time, many tools may have been moments of action more than permanent belongings. A stone was selected because it worked now. A flake was useful because it had an edge now. A surface was used because it was stable now. This gives the first stone tools a calm but powerful meaning. They show us a world where the body was learning to organize force, edge, and surface. The hammerstone gave weight to the hand. The core held the possibility of future edges. The flake gave sharpness to touch. The anvil gave resistance outside the body. Together, they answer the title more clearly. Some of the first tools humans and their relatives made were not one thing, but a small family of stone tools, each helping the body in a different way, and each opening a path toward the larger history of human making. Stone tools also help us understand why the first tools were not only objects, but traces of choices repeated across time. A single broken stone might be difficult to read. A single sharp fragment could have been made by accident, by a fall, by pressure, by heat, or by the movement of water and earth. But when many stones appear together, when flakes, cores, hammerstones, and broken pieces sit in a pattern that suggests repeated striking, the ground begins to hold a different kind of evidence. It does not give us a complete story. It does not show us the full life around those tools, but it gives us something firm enough to follow. The marks of hands changing stone in ways that natural forces do not easily explain. This is one reason the earliest stone tools matter so much. They are not just old objects. They are some of the earliest surviving signs that ancient bodies were working with the world in a repeated, recognizable way. A hammerstone might show battered surfaces where it struck again and again. A core might show scars where flakes were removed from different angles. A flake might carry a sharp edge that could be used for cutting or scraping. Small chips and fragments around them may show that the work happened in that place, or that pieces were left behind after the useful edges had been taken. None of this requires us to imagine a complete workshop in the modern sense. It only asks us to notice that stone, force, and intention left a durable pattern. In that pattern, the first tools become more than isolated things. They become a small landscape of action. One stone struck another. One edge came free. One surface became useful. One body gained force, sharpness, or control beyond what bare skin could provide. Yet even here, the answer must stay careful. The earliest stone tools we find are not always easy to classify. Some may be clearly shaped. Some may be rough. Some may sit near animal bones, plant remains, or ancient sediments that help researchers interpret them. Others may leave more questions than answers. The deeper we go in time, the more cautious the language has to become. It is safer to say that early stone tools show possibilities. Pounding, cutting, scraping, breaking, and perhaps processing materials that the body alone could not easily handle. It is less safe to say that every object had one exact purpose, or that every early maker used it in the same way. What makes these tools powerful is not a perfect list of uses, but the simple range of help they offered. A heavy stone helped with force. A flake helped with edge. A core helped produce more edges. A flat or stable stone could become a surface against which things were broken. Together they formed a toolkit that was small, flexible, and deeply practical. This also shows why stone tools do not close the question of the first tools. They open it. Because stone survives so well, it becomes the loudest witness. But a loud witness is not the only witness that once existed. Around the stones there may have been wood, plant fibers, hides, bones, shells, and other materials that were used, changed, carried, and lost. The stone record gives us the strongest preserved evidence, but it does not prove that all early tool life was made of stone. It tells us what endured. It points toward what may have vanished. That is why the story should move next beyond stone, toward the objects that were probably closer to daily life, but far less likely to survive. Still, the stone tools leave us with a clear first answer to the title. Among the earliest tools humans and their relatives made, the most visible were hammerstones, cores, flakes, and working surfaces. They helped the body strike harder, cut sharper, break tougher materials, and turn ordinary rock into useful edges. They were not the whole beginning, but they are the beginning that time allowed us to see most clearly. From them, the long story of tools begins to widen, moving from hard stone in the hand toward wood, bone, fiber, fire, shelter, food, carrying, farming, metal, memory, and the many later tools that would slowly reshape human life. If stone is the loudest witness because it lasts, wood may be one of the quietest because it vanishes. A branch can disappear into soil. A digging stick can soften, split, rot, and leave no shape behind. A wooden point can return to the earth so completely that the hand which once held it seems to have left nothing at all. This is why the story of the first tools becomes more difficult as soon as we move away from stone. Wood was probably one of the most available materials in many ancient landscapes. It could be found on the ground, broken from trees, shaped by fire, sharpened by scraping, or used almost as it was found. Yet the older the past becomes, the less likely wood is to survive. Unless it is sealed in rare conditions, protected from air, drying, insects, and decay, it usually disappears. So when we ask what the first tools humans ever made were, we have to hold two thoughts together. Stone gives us the clearest evidence, but wood may have been much closer to daily life than the evidence can easily show. A wooden tool begins with something very simple: reach. The human arm is useful, but it has a clear limit. A stick changes that limit without changing the body itself. It can touch what the hand should not touch yet. It can enter a hole before fingers enter. It can turn over leaves, move thorns aside, test mud, dig into soil, pull something closer, or push something away. A stick can be a safe distance between skin and uncertainty. In a world without gloves, metal, plastic, or built handles, that distance mattered. It gave the body a way to interact with hidden spaces, hard ground, insects, roots, small animals, water edges, and rough vegetation without placing bare fingers first. This does not require imagining complex invention. It only requires seeing how an ordinary object can extend a living body into the environment. A digging stick is one of the simplest wood tools to understand. It does not need to be perfect. It may be a straight branch, a hardened point, or a piece of wood with one end worn by use. It can loosen soil. It can help search for roots, tubers, buried food, or water-softened ground. It can make the hand stronger by concentrating force into a smaller point. Fingers are sensitive and flexible, but they are not ideal for hard earth. Nails break. Skin tears. Joints tire. A wooden point takes some of that pressure. It makes the ground answer to the hand more easily. In this sense, the digging stick belongs to the same deep family as the stone flake and the hammerstone. Each one gives the body a borrowed power. Stone gives hardness and edge. Wood gives length, leverage, and pressure. Another early wooden form is the pointed stick or spear-like shaft. Here we must be careful, because not every sharp branch was a hunting weapon, and not every wooden point can be placed neatly into one purpose. A pointed wooden object can be used to probe, dig, defend, throw, thrust, or hold something at a distance. In later and better preserved evidence, wooden spears and shaped wooden tools show that ancient humans could work wood with skill, but wood's poor survival means the full history is probably much older and less visible than the objects that remain. The important idea is not to turn every branch into a dramatic weapon. It is to understand that wood gave early humans and their relatives a new relationship with space. With wood, the hand could reach farther, press deeper, push from safer distance, and act through a flexible material that stone could not provide. Wood also may have helped connect other tools. A stone edge in the hand is useful, but a point fixed to wood, a fibre tied around wood, or a handle joined to another material opens a much wider world of toolmaking. The oldest versions of such combinations are difficult to prove, because bindings and handles often vanish first. But the logic of later tool history shows how important wood became. Shafts, handles, frames, poles, digging tools, shelters, traps, carrying supports, and many objects that made human life more organized. A tool made only of stone is one answer to the world. A tool made with wood begins to bring distance, structure, and movement into the answer. This is why wooden tools deserve a place near the beginning of the story, even when the evidence is quieter. They remind us that the first tools were not only the things that survived best, they were also the things that helped the body move through ordinary days. A branch could become reach. A stick could become pressure. A point could become distance. A pole could become support. And somewhere in that long, fragile history of wood, much of it now gone, the human body found another way to stand between itself and the difficult earth. Wood also changed the way a body could use force without spending all of that force at once. A stone is hard and heavy, but it is often short. It belongs close to the hand. A piece of wood can be longer, lighter, and more flexible. It can bend a little. It can absorb shock. It can turn a small movement at one end into pressure at the other end. This gave early humans and their relatives a different kind of help from the help offered by stone. The hammerstone made the hand heavier. The flake made the hand sharper. Wood made the hand longer. It allowed the body to work at a distance, to push, pry, lift, brace, and test the world before the body moved closer. In a rough landscape, this kind of distance could matter in quiet, ordinary ways. A stick could move thorny branches away from the skin. It could stir through leaves before a hand reached down. It could press into mud, sand, or loose soil to feel what the ground might hold. It could help turn over a stone, pull down a branch, or loosen something half buried. These actions may sound simple, but they answer the title directly, because the first tools were not only the things that cut, they were also the things that reached, pressed, moved, and tested. A digging stick is one of the clearest examples. It stands between the soft hand and the hard ground. The hand can grip it. The shoulder can guide it. The weight of the body can press through it. At the narrow end, the force becomes more focused than fingers alone could make it. This kind of tool could help with roots, tubers, soft earth, small holes, and buried materials. It could also be used to make shallow openings, break crusted soil, or search beneath a surface without tearing the hand. We should not imagine one perfect design at the beginning. A digging stick might be a natural branch with one end worn down. It might be a piece of wood broken to a point. It might be hardened slightly by drying or by contact with fire in later contexts. The important point is not decoration or finish. The important point is function. It made the ground easier to work. It gave the body a way to press into the earth through another material. A wooden point also changed the relationship between humans and animals, but this must be described calmly. Not every pointed stick was a spear, and not every spear was used in the same way. Still, a pointed shaft could keep distance between a human body and something moving, dangerous, hidden, or difficult to control. It could be used for thrusting, throwing, probing, pinning, or driving something away. In rare cases where ancient wooden objects have survived, they remind us that wood was not just a temporary material. It could be shaped carefully. It could be balanced. It could be chosen for straightness, weight, and strength. But because so much older wood is gone, the full story is likely much wider than the surviving record. This is why wooden tools carry a special kind of silence. They may have been everywhere in daily life, yet almost nowhere in the oldest ground. Wood also opened the path toward combined tools. A sharp stone held in the hand is one kind of tool. A sharp piece attached to wood becomes something different. A handle can protect the hand. A shaft can carry force farther. A pole can turn a small point into a tool of distance. A frame can hold shelter materials. A branch can become part of a trap, a support, a carrying pole, or a simple structure. Binding materials, if they were used, would have been even more fragile than the wood itself, so the earliest joined tools are difficult to see clearly. But later human history shows how powerful this idea became. Once wood, stone, bone, fibre, and skin could work together, a tool was no longer just one object. It could become a system of parts. For now, near the beginning, the meaning remained simple and deep. Stone gave early tool use its most durable witness, but wood may have given it much of its daily reach. A stick could extend the arm, a digging tool could protect the fingers, a point could create distance, a pole could support weight, a handle could change how another tool was held. These are not small details beside the story of stone. They are another answer to the question of what the first tools were. Not only hard rocks and sharp flakes, but also the quiet wooden objects that help the human body reach farther into the world. Wooden tools also help us notice something easy to miss. The first tools were not only made for sharpness or force, but for living through space. A stone flake changes the edge of the hand. A hammerstone changes the weight of the hand. But wood changes the distance around the body. It lets the hand act before the body arrives. It lets pressure travel through a branch, a shaft, a pole, or a point. It turns the landscape into something that can be tested from just a little farther away. In a world of thorns, insects, holes, water edges, loose ground, hidden roots, and animals that could not always be touched safely, that extra distance was not a small thing. It was a way for the body to move with more caution and more reach. A simple stick could help a person cross a difficult patch of ground, push aside vegetation, turn over a buried object, or feel the firmness of mud before stepping forward. It could become support for walking, pressure for digging, length for reaching, or a barrier between skin and danger. None of this requires a dramatic scene. These are quiet uses, repeated in ordinary conditions, and they may have shaped daily life more than any single spectacular invention. The problem, of course, is that most of this wooden world is gone. Stone can lie in a buried layer and wait. Wood cannot usually do that. It softens, cracks, becomes food for insects and microbes, and loses the form that once made it useful. Only rare conditions can protect it well enough for archaeologists to find it much later. This means the oldest story of wooden tools is probably written more in absence than in objects. We can sometimes see later surviving examples of shaped wood, and we can understand from human behavior that sticks, shafts, poles, digging tools, and handles were deeply useful. But for the earliest periods, we must speak with restraint. The absence of surviving wood does not prove the absence of wooden tools. It only reminds us that time preserves some materials and erases others. This is why the answer to the title must always keep wood beside stone. If we only follow what survives best, we may mistake the strongest evidence for the whole of life. A group of stone flakes can be real and important, but around those flakes there may once have been branches used to dig, poles used to carry, shafts used to extend reach, and pieces of wood used as handles or supports. Some may have been used once and abandoned. Some may have been carried for a while, some may have been reshaped, burned, sharpened, or worn down by repeated contact with earth and plants. Many would leave nothing clear behind, yet their usefulness is easy to understand because it comes directly from the limits of the body. Fingers are precise but fragile, arms are flexible but short, skin is sensitive but easily injured. A wooden tool answers those limits by adding length, leverage, and a safer point of contact. It also opens the next stage of the tool story, because wood is often the material that allows other materials to work together. A stone edge can cut in the hand, but with a handle it can be held differently. A point can pierce, but with a shaft it can act farther away. A shelter needs frames, a bundle needs supports, a carrying load can be balanced on a pole. Later in human history, wood would become boats, bows, handles, wheels, ploughs, beams, bowls, ladders, and countless objects that shaped daily life. But the distant beginning was quieter. It may have been only a branch chosen because it was straight, a stick worn at one end, a point made sharper by use, or a pole that helped a body reach what it could not reach alone. In that sense, wooden tools remind us that the first tools were not only preserved artifacts, they were relationships with material. Stone gave us the oldest visible edges. Wood gave the body reach, distance, and structure. And together, they move the story beyond a hand-holding rock toward a human life slowly surrounded by helpful objects. After stone and wood, another group of early tools came from the bodies of animals and from the hard edges of the natural world: bone, antler, horn, tooth, shell, and sometimes ivory in later contexts where it was available. These materials matter because they sit between stone and wood in a quiet way. They are not as hard and brittle as many stones. They are not as soft and easily lost as wood. They can be curved, pointed, thin, smooth, hollow, or strong along their length. They can fit the hand differently. They can enter gaps that a thick stone cannot enter. They can scrape without breaking in the same way a sharp flake might. They can become points, wedges, awls, needles, hooks, polishers, digging pieces, and many kinds of small working objects. Some of these forms belong to much later and clearer periods of human toolmaking, so we must not place every refined bone tool at the very beginning, but the broad idea is safe and important. Early humans did not only use what came from the ground or from plants, they also used the hard remains of living creatures, and those remains gave the hand a different kind of help. A bone fragment could be useful because of its shape before it was carefully altered. A long splinter could make a point. A rib or flat piece could scrape. A dense piece of bone could press, pry, or dig. A tooth could offer a naturally hard edge or point. A shell could have a thin rim that scraped or cut softer material. In places near rivers, lakes, or coasts, shells could become part of daily work because they were common, sharp-edged, and easy to hold. In other landscapes, antler or horn could offer a tough, springy material for points or pressure tools. This does not mean every piece was shaped into a finished artifact. Many may have been used simply because they were already close to the right form. That is part of the early tool story. Before tools became standardized, the world itself offered many half-ready objects, and the hand learned which ones answered a task. Bone and shell tools also make the question of function more varied. Stone often brings to mind cutting and striking. Wood brings to mind reaching, digging, and support. Bone and shell bring us closer to scraping, piercing, smoothing, and working with softer materials. A pointed bone can make a hole where a finger cannot. A shell edge can scrape a surface more gently than a heavy stone. A curved bone can fit against another curved surface. A small hard point can help separate fibers, work hide, clean a surface, or press into packed material. We should stay careful with exact claims, because the use of an ancient object depends on context, wear marks, associated finds, and many details that are not always preserved. But as a group, these materials clearly widened the range of what tools could do. They gave early human hands not only weight, edge, and distance, but also delicacy. They made it possible to work in smaller places, with narrower pressure, and with more controlled contact. This is an important step in answering what the first tools humans ever made were, because it prevents the story from becoming only a story of stones and sticks. The early tool world was probably much more mixed. A stone might cut, A wooden stick might dig, a bone might pierce, a shell might scrape, a fibre might tie, a hide might carry or cover. Each material answered a different problem in the body's relationship with the environment. Over long stretches of time, this material knowledge became one of the quiet foundations of human life. A person did not need metal to have a rich tool world. Long before metal, the world already contained hardness, sharpness, curve, point, surface, weight, flexibility, and binding. The task was to notice them, use them, and sometimes change them. Bone, antler, horn, tooth, and shell show that early tools were not only about power, they were also about fit. The right object could fit the hand, fit a task, fit a surface, or fit a small space where the body alone could not work. And from that fit, another layer of human history began to appear. Not the sudden invention of complex technology, but the slow discovery that every part of the natural world might hold a different answer to the limits of the body. Bone and shell tools become especially important when we think about tasks that needed more than blunt force. A hammerstone could break, a flake could cut, a stick could reach or dig, but many parts of ancient life required pressure that was narrower, slower, and more controlled. A person might need to scrape a surface without shattering it, open a small space without crushing everything around it, make a hole through hide or plant material, smooth a rough edge, loosen something packed into soil, or separate fibres that were too tough for fingernails. For those kinds of work, a piece of bone, antler, horn, tooth, or shell could be useful in ways that stone and wood were not. Bone can be hard, but it is often less brittle than a sharp stone edge. Antler can be tough and slightly elastic. Shell can be thin, curved, and naturally edged. Teeth and claws, where they were available from animal remains, could offer points and hard surfaces already shaped by nature. This made the early tool world less like a set of perfect inventions and more like a careful search through available materials. The question was not only, what can be made? It was also, what is already here that fits the task? A pointed bone fragment could concentrate force into a small place. That simple function matters. Fingers can press, but they spread pressure across soft skin. A point narrows that pressure. It can make an opening, lift a thin layer, clean a groove, or work into a place that the finger cannot enter. Later in human history, more clearly shaped bone awls and needles would become important for working hides, clothing, containers, and other soft materials. But even before refined forms, the basic usefulness of a hard point is easy to understand. It gives the hand a small extension that is both firm and narrow. A scraper made from bone or shell answers a slightly different need. Scraping is not the same as cutting. Cutting separates. Scraping removes, thins, cleans, smooths, or prepares a surface. A shell edge can move across a softer material with a different feel than a stone flake. A broad bone edge can rub and press. A curved surface can match another curve. These qualities may have mattered in preparing hides, working plant fibers, cleaning surfaces, shaping wood, or handling materials that required patience rather than a single hard blow. We should not claim every ancient shell or bone edge was used in the same way, because use depends on evidence. But the range of possible functions helps explain why these materials appear again and again in the long history of tools. They gave the hand a quieter kind of precision. These materials also connect tools to animals in a deeper way. Early humans and their relatives did not live in a world where animals were only hunted or avoided. Animal bodies, when available, could become food, covering, fuel in some contexts, decoration in later contexts, and tools. A bone could remain useful after the living body was gone. A shell could become a working edge after the animal inside was no longer there. A horn or antler could become a point, a wedge, or a pressure tool. This does not require us to imagine a fully planned system in the beginning. It only shows that the boundary between environment, food, and tool was not always clear. The remains of life could return as objects that helped life continue. That is a quiet but powerful part of the story. Bone and shell tools also prepare the way for more complex objects, because they work well with other materials. A pointed piece can be held directly, but it can also be fixed into a handle. A thin bone piece can be tied, inserted, smoothed, or shaped. A shell can be held in the hand, but it can also become part of a container, ornament, scraper, or cutting edge in later traditions. Once fibre, hide, sinew, resin, or wood enters the picture, tools can become joined objects. A tool no longer has to be a single thing. It can be a relationship between hard point, soft binding, wooden support, and human grip. That step is difficult to see in the oldest record because the soft parts disappear first. But the logic is important. Bone, horn, antler, tooth, and shell made early toolmaking more detailed. They brought smallness, curve, point, and texture into the hand. They helped ancient bodies do slower work, finer work, and work that required contact with surfaces rather than just impact. In the larger answer to what the first tools humans ever made were, they remind us that early tool use was not only a story of stones on the ground, it was also a story of animal remains, water edges, broken shells, narrow points, scraped surfaces, and the patient discovery that even after life ended, hard pieces of the natural world could still help another life continue. Bone, horn, antler, tooth, and shell bring the early tool story closer to the small work of everyday survival. Stone can look ancient because it survives. Wood can feel ancient because it is simple and close to the hand. But bone and shell remind us that the first tool world was not made from one material alone. It was mixed, practical, and shaped by what the environment offered. In some places, a broken bone may have been easier to find than a good flaking stone. Near water, shells may have been common. In landscapes with large animals, horns, teeth, and antlers could appear as hard, natural shapes already formed by life itself. These materials were not just substitutes for stone. They had their own qualities. Bone could be firm, but workable. Antler could take pressure without breaking as sharply as stone. Shell could be thin and edged. A tooth could bring a natural point or ridge into the hand. Each one helped the body in a different way. And that difference matters because tools were not only about making the hand stronger, they were also about making the hand more specific. A hand can hold, but a pointed bone can enter. A hand can rub, but a shell edge can scrape. A hand can pull, but a hard, narrow object can lift, separate, or open a small space. When we think of the first tools, we may picture a person striking stone or holding a branch, but much of life is not made of large, dramatic actions. It is made of smaller tasks: preparing a surface, loosening a fibre, cleaning a hide, opening a gap, shaping a piece of wood, scraping a hard layer, or making a small hole where a cord or thong might pass. Later human history gives us clearer examples of bone needles, awls, points, fishhooks, harpoons, and ornaments. But the deeper principle is older and simpler. Hard animal materials could turn the hand into something narrower, smoother, sharper, or more patient than the hand alone. They could help with the kind of work that does not always leave large, obvious traces. This is one reason they are important for the title. The question is not only what the first tools were in a museum case. It is what kinds of objects helped ancient bodies live through real environments. Bone and shell may not always survive as clearly as stone, and even when they do survive, it can be difficult to know whether a mark came from use, breakage, animals, weather, or later movement in the ground. Careful interpretation is necessary, but their role in the broader history of tools is undeniable. Across many periods and many regions, human groups learned to use animal materials in increasingly varied ways. The basic logic is easy to follow without pretending to know every lost detail. Where the body needed a point, bone could provide one. Where it needed a scraper, shell or bone could answer. Where it needed a smoother edge, a curved surface, or a hard, narrow tip, the remains of animals could become part of the hand's reach. This also changes the emotional shape of the tool story. A tool was not always something separate from life. Sometimes it came from life that had already passed. A bone could come from food, from remains found in the landscape, or from animals that shared the same difficult world. A shell could come from water, shore, or river edge. A tooth could carry the hardness of another creature into human use. In this way, the early tool world was deeply connected to the living world around it. The ground gave stone, trees gave wood, animals and waters gave bone, horn, tooth, and shell. Later, Humans would combine these materials more deliberately: a wooden handle, a stone edge, a bone point, a fiber binding, a hide wrapping. But even before those combinations became clear in the record, the separate materials already showed a pattern. The body was learning not one answer, but many answers. Force, edge, reach, point, curve, surface, binding, carrying, warmth, shelter, memory. The first tools were not only the beginning of technology, they were the beginning of noticing that the world was full of forms the body did not have, and each form could help the body meet a different kind of difficulty. Fire changed the story of tools because it was not only something humans used, it was something they had to care for, hold in place, feed, protect, and work around. A stone can be picked up and dropped, a stick can be carried or left behind, a bone point can be used until it breaks. But fire is different. It does not stay useful by itself. It needs fuel, it needs space, it needs distance from the body, yet closeness to the body. It gives warmth and light, but it can also burn skin, destroy shelter, or vanish if neglected. This is why fire slowly gathered tools around it. Before metal pots, before ovens, before kitchens, before the familiar objects of cooking, there were simpler things: sticks for moving, burning wood, stones placed around heat, cleared ground, ash beds, hearths, digging tools for shaping shallow pits, and perhaps containers made from materials that rarely survive well. These were not all tools in the same way a flake or hammerstone was a tool, but they belonged to the same human pattern. They stood between the body and a force the body could not touch directly. A hand cannot hold flame, a mouth cannot safely take food from the center of heat, bare feet cannot rest in burning ash. So the body needed objects, spaces, and habits that made fire usable without making it uncontrollable. This is the first important point. Fire did not simply add heat to human life. It changed the working area around the body. A hearth, even in a very simple form, is a kind of tool space. It gives fire a place. It separates burning material from the rest of the ground. Stones, if used around a fire, could help mark, support, contain, or hold heat. A stick could shift fuel without the hand entering flame. A branch could move hot coals. A flat stone could become a surface warmed by fire, or placed near food. Ash could protect heat, slow burning, or preserve embers for a time. We should be careful here, because the earliest control of fire is a complex subject, and evidence varies by place and period. It would be wrong to pretend every early group used fire in the same way, or that every ancient burned patch was a clear hearth. But for the long history of human tools, the logic remains strong. Once fire became part of life, humans needed ways to manage it. The tool was no longer only a hard object in the hand. It could also be an arranged place, a prepared surface, a repeated habit of placing wood, stone, ash, food, and body at the right distance from heat. Fire also changed food tools without making the video only about food. A sharp flake could cut. A stone could crack. A stick could dig. But heat changed the condition of many materials. Some foods become softer near heat. Some plant materials become easier to chew or process. Some animal tissues change texture. Some hard outer surfaces can crack, loosen, or become easier to open. This did not remove the need for older tools. It often made them work together. A digging stick might bring up a root. A stone flake might cut or peel. A fire might soften. A stick might move the food near or away from heat. A stone surface might hold it. Later, containers and cooking vessels would become central in many human societies, but before durable pottery, many possible containers made from wood, bark, skin, woven fibers, gourds, or other organic materials would have been far less likely to survive. This matters because the history of fire-related tools is partly missing, just like the history of wooden tools. The things most useful around fire were not always the things most likely to remain. A burned stone might survive, ash might leave a trace, charcoal might remain in rare contexts, but a wooden stick used to move coals, a bark container, a fibre sling, or a temporary frame could disappear almost completely. Fire also created time around tools. A stone edge can be used in a moment. A wooden stick can be used and left. Fire asks for waiting. Fuel must burn down. Heat must gather. Embers must be watched. Food, wood, stone, and ash change slowly in relation to one another. This slower rhythm may have made tool use more organized, not necessarily in a dramatic or modern way, but in a practical way. The body had to learn distance from heat, timing near heat, and the placement of objects around heat. In that sense, the tools of fire were not only sticks and stones, they were also arrangements, where the fire sat, where fuel was kept, where people could sit safely, where food could be placed, where embers could be protected, and where ash could remain without harming the next movement of the body. This is why fire belongs in the answer to what the first tools humans ever made were. Even if fire itself is not a tool like a hammerstone or a flake, fire created a new circle of tools around it. It required objects for carrying, moving, holding, containing, cutting, scraping, digging, and waiting. It turned the landscape into a warmer and more dangerous workspace. It made the human body more dependent on distance, placement, and control. And from that quiet circle of heat, stone, wood, ash, food, and hands, another stage of the tool story began. Fire also made tools work together in ways that earlier objects did not always require. A stone flake could cut on its own. A digging stick could press into the ground on its own. But once heat entered the center of human life, one object was rarely enough. A stick might move burning wood. A stone might hold food near warmth. A cleared patch of ground might keep flame away from dry grass. Ash might cover embers and keep heat alive after the bright flame had faded. A flat stone might become a resting place near the fire. A hollow object, if available, might hold water, plants, fat, or soft material close enough to heat to change them. None of this needs to look like a kitchen. It was still simple, uncertain, and shaped by local materials. But it shows a new kind of tool world, where the body was not only using one object at a time, it was arranging several things around a force that could not be touched directly. This is why the tools of fire are different from hammerstones, flakes, sticks, and bone points. They did not only extend the hand, they helped organize a small space. Around fire, distance became a tool. Too close, and the body could be burned. Too far, and the heat became useless. The human hand needed ways to move things into that middle space, where warmth could work without danger taking over. A branch could push fuel inward. A longer stick could pull burning pieces apart. Stones could mark a boundary. Earth could be scraped away to make a safer place. In later periods, people would develop more durable hearths, ovens, pottery, lamps, and cooking vessels, but the deeper beginning was quieter. It may have been a circle of cleared ground, a few stones, a bed of ash, and simple objects used to move heat without touching it. Fire also changed the meaning of time in tool use. Cutting with a flake is immediate. Striking with a stone is immediate. Digging with a stick can be slow, but the action is still direct. Fire asks the body to wait. Wood must catch. Flames must settle. Embers must form. Food or material placed near heat changes gradually. This waiting created a different rhythm around tools. A person could cut, scrape, place, turn, remove, cool, and return. The work no longer happened only at the moment of contact. It happened through timing. A tool near fire might not be useful because it was sharp or heavy, but because it allowed something to remain in place, move at the right moment, or avoid direct contact with heat. This matters for the wider question of the first tools because it shows that tools were becoming more than objects held in the hand. They were becoming relationships between hand, material, space, and time. A stone edge helped separate. A wooden stick helped reach. A bone point helped press. Fire-related tools helped manage change. They helped transform what was placed near heat, whether food, wood, stone, hide, or other materials. We should be careful not to describe every early fire use as if it were the same everywhere. The evidence for controlled fire is complex, and different human groups may have used fire in different ways at different times. But the basic idea remains safe. Once fire became part of life, humans needed tools and arrangements to live with it. Fire was too useful to ignore and too dangerous to touch. So the body placed things between itself and flame: sticks, stones, earth, ash, containers, distance, and patience. In that circle, another answer to the title appears. The first tools were not only the first things made sharp or heavy, they were also the first ways humans learned to handle forces larger than the body without being consumed by them. The tools of fire also show how human life began to gather around places, not only around objects. A hammerstone can be carried away, a flake can be dropped after use, a pointed stick can be replaced by another branch. But a fire leaves a place behind. It leaves ash, charcoal, burned earth, heat-stained stone, and a memory of where bodies once stayed close enough to warmth but not close enough to be harmed. This matters because fire-related tools were often not single objects with clear edges. They were arrangements. A hearth, even in a very simple form, was a prepared relationship between ground, fuel, air, heat, and human movement. It gave flame a boundary. It gave people a center. It gave tools a reason to be placed nearby. Around that center, many older tools gained new roles. A stick was no longer only for digging or reaching. It could move coals, shift burning wood, or turn something placed near heat. A stone was no longer only for striking or cutting. It could hold warmth, support food, mark a safe edge, or sit beneath heated material. A scraping tool could prepare bark, hide, wood, or plant matter before it met the fire. A container, when available, could bring water or soft material close to heat without letting it disappear into the ground. None of these things should be imagined as one universal system used everywhere in the same way. Human groups lived in different landscapes, with different plants, animals, stones, climates, and habits. But the deeper pattern is clear enough. Fire made tools gather into a working circle. It turned separate objects into helpers around a force that had to be controlled. This also helps us understand why fire sits between early tools and later human complexity. It did not replace stone, wood, bone, shell, or fiber. It made them interact. A wooden stick could be shaped by fire. A stone could be cracked by heat or warmed beside embers. Food could be cut before heating, softened by heat, then scraped or broken afterward. Hide, wood, or plant materials might be dried, smoked, hardened, bent, or changed in ways that depended on careful contact with warmth. We should not stretch the evidence too far for the earliest periods, but it is reasonable to say that heat expanded what materials could become. It added transformation to the tool story. Before fire, a tool mainly gave the body force, edge, reach, pressure, or surface. With fire, tools also began to help manage change. Raw to cooked, wet to dry, cold to warm, hard to softer, loose to joined, dangerous to usable. That is a quiet, but enormous shift. Fire also made human attention slower. The body had to notice whether flame was rising, fading, spreading, or settling into embers. It had to keep distance. It had to place objects carefully. It had to return to the same center again and again. In this way, fire-related tools helped create a rhythm of waiting, tending, and arranging. The first tools may have begun as things held in the hand, but around fire, tools began to shape a small world around the body. A safe patch of ground, a few stones, a stick, ash, fuel, and distance could become a temporary human place. That place might vanish with rain and wind, but while it lasted, it changed what the body could do. It could warm, soften, protect, gather, and transform. So when we ask what the first tools humans ever made were, fire reminds us not to look only for sharp edges or heavy stones. Some tools help the hand strike, some help the hand cut, some help the hand reach. But the tools around fire helped humans live beside something powerful without touching it directly, and that changed the meaning of toolmaking itself. When tools began to help with hunting and cutting meat, the story moved into a more dangerous space. A stone could strike without danger from a living animal. A stick could dig the ground without the ground turning back. But animals moved, resisted, fled, kicked, bit, and carried their own strength. The human body was not built like the body of a large predator. It did not have long claws, heavy jaws, thick hide, or the speed of many animals across open ground. So tools connected to hunting and butchering answered a very clear problem. How could a softer, slower, more vulnerable body take part in a world where food could run away, fight back, or become difficult to process after death? The first answer was not one perfect weapon. It was a set of simple tools that changed distance, force, and access. A pointed wooden shaft could keep the body farther from danger. A thrown stick or spear-like object could carry force beyond the reach of the arm. A sharpened point could focus pressure into a smaller area. A stone flake could cut through tissue, skin, or connective material after an animal was dead or scavenged. A heavy stone could break bone or open hard parts that teeth alone could not easily manage. Each tool answered a different stage of contact with animal life. Some helped before contact. Some helped at the moment of contact. Some helped after, when the real work was not chasing, but cutting, opening, scraping, dividing, carrying, and using as much material as possible. This matters because hunting tools are often imagined only as dramatic weapons, but much of their importance may have been calmer and more practical. A spear, a point, or a sharpened shaft created distance between the body and danger. A cutting flake created access after the danger had passed. A scraper could help work hide. A bone or antler point could pierce or separate. A cord, thong, or fibre binding could later help fasten parts together, though such materials often vanish from the oldest evidence. The tool world around animals was not only about killing, it was about handling the consequences of animal bodies: meat, skin, bone, fat, tendons, teeth, horns, antlers, and hides that could become food, covering, containers, bindings, or future tools. In this way, one animal could become many kinds of material, and each material required its own kind of object. We should stay careful with certainty. Archaeology can show cut marks, broken bones, stone flakes, points, and sometimes preserved wooden objects, but it cannot always tell us exactly how every event happened. Some early humans and human relatives may have hunted in some contexts, scavenged in others, and used mixed strategies depending on landscape, season, available animals, and group behavior. It would be too simple to imagine one universal scene. What we can say more safely is that tools made animal resources easier to reach and process. Without a sharp edge, skin and connective tissue are difficult. Without a heavy object, many bones are hard to open. Without distance, a living animal can be dangerous. Without carrying tools, useful parts may be left behind. So the hunting and butchering toolkit widened the human relationship with animals from a moment of encounter into a sequence of tasks. First there was approach, distance, risk, and movement. Then came cutting, scraping, breaking, dividing, and carrying. Later hide might become covering, bone might become a point, sinew or fibre might become binding, antler might become a pressure tool. Nothing was wasted in the abstract sense, but we should not pretend we know every decision. What matters is the pattern. Tools help turn a dangerous animal body into materials that could support human life. This is another answer to what the first tools humans ever made were. They were not only stones, sticks, bones, and fire tools in isolation. They were also the first ways humans learned to face moving life at a safer distance, then work carefully with what remained. A hunting tool did not have to begin as something complex. It could begin with a straight piece of wood, a sharpened end, a heavy throwing object, or a point added to a shaft much later in the long history of making. What mattered was the change in distance. The bare hand must come close. The mouth must come closer still. But a spear-like shaft, a pointed stick, or a thrown object can carry human force outward, beyond the skin. That distance did not make humans invincible. It did not remove danger, but it changed the moment of contact. It allowed the body to act without placing the whole body inside the animal's strongest range. This is why hunting tools belong in the larger answer to the title. They show that tools were not only for working on still materials like stone, wood, soil, or hide. They were also for working in a world that moved. A living animal does not wait like a branch or a stone. It reacts, it turns, it runs, it may fight. Tools gave early humans and their relatives ways to meet that movement with a little more reach, a little more force, and a little more control. A wooden spear or pointed shaft is one clear example, but it should be handled carefully. Wooden objects rarely survive from deep time, and the oldest preserved examples come from special conditions. Still, the form itself is easy to understand. A long shaft can be thrust. It can be thrown. It can keep the body farther away. It can also be used for probing, pushing, or defense, depending on the situation. A stone point attached to a wooden shaft, where such tools appear in later records, creates another step. Now sharpness and distance are joined. The edge or point no longer sits only in the hand. It travels through wood. This kind of combined tool shows how earlier materials began to work together. Stone for cutting or piercing, wood for length, fibre or sinew for binding, perhaps resin or other adhesives in later technological traditions. The soft binding materials often disappear first, so the full tool may be missing even when one hard piece remains. Cutting tools were just as important after an animal was down, dead, or found already dead. A sharp flake could open skin. It could separate meat from bone. It could cut tendon, trim hide, or divide usable pieces into portions that could be carried. This stage is less dramatic than the chase, but it may have mattered even more in ordinary survival. Large animal bodies are difficult to use without edges. Teeth and hands alone are limited. A stone flake gives the hand a narrow sharpness outside the mouth. A scraper can work a hide, removing tissue or preparing a surface. A heavy stone can break bone to reach material inside. A wedge-like piece can help split or open. Each tool belongs to a different task, and together they make animal resources more accessible. This is where the story widens beyond hunting. Tools used around animals also helped create future tools. Bone could become a point. Antler could become a pressure tool. Hide could become covering, containers, straps, or shelter material. Tendon or plant fibre could help bind objects together. Fat could have uses around fire or preservation in later contexts. We should not claim one neat system existed everywhere, because human groups lived in different landscapes and used different animals. But the pattern is clear. Once tools help people work with animal bodies, one resource could become many materials. Hunting and butchering tools were therefore not only about getting food, they were about transforming risk into usable matter. A pointed shaft answered distance. A stone point answered penetration. A flake answered cutting. A scraper answered surface work. A heavy stone answered breaking. A binding answered connection. These tools help the body face movement, danger, weight, skin, bone, and distance. They also show why the first tools were not a single invention, but a growing set of answers to different problems in the human world. The tools used around animals also changed what happened after danger had passed. In many modern imaginations, hunting ends when the animal falls, but for ancient people, that moment may have been only the beginning of the hardest work. A large body is heavy, skin is tough, tendons resist pulling, bones protect what is inside them, meat spoils. Useful parts must be separated, carried, shared, dried, cooked, scraped, broken, or turned into other materials. Without tools, the body could only do part of this work. Hands can pull, teeth can tear, and stones can strike, but animal bodies contain many layers that do not yield easily. This is where flakes, scrapers, points, wedges, hammerstones, and carrying materials became part of a wider tool world. A sharp flake could open a surface that fingers could not open cleanly. A scraper could prepare hide by working slowly across it. A heavy stone could break bone where teeth would fail. A pointed piece of bone or antler could press into tight places. A wooden shaft could move or hold something at a distance. A cord, strip of hide, or plant fibre could bind, drag, carry, or fasten. Each tool answered one small part of the animal body, and together they turned a difficult resource into many possible uses. This is important because it keeps the story from becoming only a story of weapons. A spear or point may be the most visible hunting image, but cutting and processing tools may have mattered just as much for survival. A group could not live only by reaching an animal. It also had to work with what came afterward. Stone flakes could help divide meat into pieces that could be moved. Scrapers could help prepare skin for covering, bedding, shelter, or containers in later traditions. Bone and antler could become new points or pressure tools. Tendons, sinew, or plant fibers could help tie things together. Horn, tooth, and shell could enter the same broad material world. In this way, tools around animals created a cycle. A tool helped reach or process an animal, and the animal then provided material for more tools. This does not mean every animal was used completely, or that every group followed the same pattern. The evidence does not allow such a neat picture, but the general relationship is clear. Animal bodies were not only food. They could also become surfaces, coverings, bindings, points, edges, and supports. The early tool story therefore moved through stages of contact. First, there was distance, because living animals could be dangerous. Then there was access, because skin and bone were difficult. Then there was division, because useful material had to be separated from weight. Then there was transformation, because hide, bone, antler, tendon, fat, and other materials could enter later human work. Tools helped at each step. A pointed shaft changed distance. A flake changed access. A scraper changed surface. A hammerstone changed bone. A binding changed movement and carrying. These are quiet functions, but they show how practical and specific early tools were. They were not mysterious objects made only to symbolize intelligence. They were answers to the real resistance of the world. By the end of this stage, the answer to the title has become wider. Some of the first tools were stones, flakes, sticks, bones, shells, and fire arrangements. But in the world of hunting and animal processing, those tools began to work together around moving life, danger, flesh, hide, bone, and distance. They helped early humans and their relatives meet animals not only as food, but as powerful sources of material. And from that difficult meeting, the story of tools moved toward clothing, shelter, carrying, warmth, and the long effort to make the body safer in places where the body alone was never enough. The next group of tools moved the story from contact with animals toward protection from the world itself. A sharp flake could open a hide, and a scraper could clean its surface, but a hide was not useful as covering until it could be shaped, softened, pierced, tied, wrapped, or held in place. This is where tools for clothing and shelter begin to matter. They did not make the human body stronger in the way a hammerstone added force. They did not make the hand longer in the way a stick added reach. Instead, they helped the body carry a small environment with it. A piece of animal skin, a layer of plant fiber, a tied bundle of grass, or a frame of wood could stand between skin and cold, wind, rain, insects, rough ground, or darkness. In deep human history, this was not a small change. The body could no longer depend only on its own hair, skin, fat, and movement. It could begin to build protection around itself. Some of the tools involved were simple. A flake could cut hide into a useful shape. A scraper could remove tissue from the inner surface of skin. A pointed bone, antler, or thorn-like object could make holes where fingers could not. A cord made from plant fiber, sinew, hide strips, or other flexible material could pass through those holes or tie pieces together. Later, bone needles would make sewing more controlled and more precise. But before refined needles, the basic need was already clear. Soft materials had to be opened, joined, tightened, wrapped, and repaired. A covering that cannot be fastened may slip away. A shelter material that cannot be tied may fall apart. A hide that is not scraped or prepared may decay, stiffen, or become difficult to use. So the tool world around clothing and shelter was not one object. It was a chain of small objects: cutting edge, scraper, point, cord, knot, frame, weight, and support. Shelter tools widened the same idea. A branch could become part of a frame. A pole could lift a covering above the body. A digging stick could help set a support into the ground. Stones could hold edges down. Fibers could bind wood together. Hide, bark, leaves, reeds, grass, or woven plant matter could become layers against wind and weather. Many of these materials rarely survive from the oldest periods, so we must be careful when speaking about exact beginnings. But the function is easy to understand because every body needs rest, and rest is difficult without some protection. To sleep on open ground under cold air or heavy rain is to feel how vulnerable the body is. Tools for shelter did not simply create comfort, they created safer pauses. They gave the body a place to stop. They allowed warmth to remain longer, wind to be blocked, insects to be kept farther away, and the ground to become a little less harsh. This is why clothing and shelter tools belong in the answer to what the first tools humans ever made were. They show that tools were not only about cutting, hunting, or food, they were also about making the body less exposed. A scraper, an awl-like point, a cord, a wooden frame, and a stone weight may look modest beside later buildings and woven cloth, but they answer one of the oldest human problems. How can a fragile body remain alive when the landscape does not protect it? These tools help turn animal hide, plant fibre, branches, bark and earth into layers of safety. They did not remove danger. They did not create a permanent home at once, but they began the slow movement from surviving in the open toward shaping small human spaces inside the larger world. Clothing tools change the boundary of the body. Skin is alive, but it is not enough in every place. It can feel heat and cold, but it cannot choose to become thicker in a single night. It can heal, but only after damage has already happened. It can sweat, shiver, and tighten, but those reactions do not create a roof, a wrap, or a layer against rough ground. This is why tools for working soft materials were so important. A hide taken from an animal was not automatically clothing. A bundle of grass was not automatically bedding. A strip of bark was not automatically shelter. These materials had to be cut, scraped, softened, pierced, folded, tied, weighted, or joined before they could protect a body well. The tools that did this work were often small and easy to overlook. A sharp flake, a scraping edge, a pointed bone, a thorn, a strip of hide, a plant cord, a stone weight, a wooden peg, a frame made from branches. None of them looked like a modern coat, tent, or blanket, but together they helped make the first layers between human skin and the outside world. A scraper was especially important because hides and skins are not simple materials. They carry tissue, fat, hair, moisture, smell, and stiffness. To become useful as covering, wrapping, bedding, or shelter, a hide often needs careful surface work. Scraping removes, thins, cleans, and prepares. It is slower than cutting. It does not have the same dramatic feeling as a spear or a hammerstone, but it belongs very close to the quiet daily work that allowed humans to live in more difficult environments. A scraping tool could be made from stone, bone, shell, or another hard edge, depending on place and available material. A person using it did not need metal. The important thing was contact. Edge against surface, pressure against resistance, hand guided by repeated movement. A pointed tool answered another need. Soft materials must often be pierced before they can be tied. A hole allows a cord to pass through. A cord allows a covering to be tightened, closed, hung, repaired, or attached to a frame. Later bone needles made this work much more precise, but the deeper idea is older than any refined needle. A hard point can open a path through material. A thorn, bone splinter, antler point, or shaped piece could help make small openings where fingers could not. Once holes and cords existed together, loose materials could become joined materials. A skin could wrap more closely. A bundle could hold its shape. A shelter covering could be fastened. A sleeping surface could be tied or weighted. This is where clothing and shelter tools meet. Both depend on joining. A body covering joins material around skin. A shelter joins material around space. A cord can close a hide around the shoulders, but it can also bind branches into a frame. A stone weight can hold down the edge of a covering, but it can also keep a hide from moving in wind. A wooden peg can fix something to the ground. A pole can lift material above the body. These are modest tools, but they change the meaning of rest. They help create a protected pause in a world that keeps moving. For the long story of human tools, this matters deeply. The first tools did not only help humans strike, cut, dig, hunt, or cook. They also helped humans sleep, recover, carry warmth, and make rough places a little less exposed. Clothing and shelter tools show that toolmaking was not only about power over the world, it was also about making the body less alone inside it. Shelter tools also show that one of the oldest human needs was not only movement, but stopping. A body can walk, search, carry, dig, cut, and hunt, but eventually it must rest. Rest is difficult when the ground is cold, wet, uneven, full of insects, or exposed to wind. It is difficult when rain reaches the skin, when heat leaves the body too quickly, or when darkness removes the safety of sight. This is why the tools around shelter belong beside the tools around stone, wood, bone, fire, and animals. They answered a different problem. They did not help the hand strike harder or cut cleaner. They helped the body remain in one place without being completely open to the world. A shelter could begin with very simple elements: branches, poles, bark, leaves, grasses, hides, stones, earth, and cord. A branch could lift a covering. A pole could create height. A stone could hold an edge down. A digging stick could make a shallow hole for a support. A cord could bind pieces together. A hide, bark sheet, or plant layer could block some wind or rain. None of these things needed to look like a house. The early shelter world may have been temporary, local, and shaped by what was nearby. In one place, branches and leaves might matter most. In another, skins and stones. In another, grasses, reeds, bark, or earth. The tool was not only the object, it was the way the objects were arranged so the body could pause. This is important for the title because many people think of the first tools as handheld objects only. But a shelter frame is also a tool if it changes what the body can survive. A cord is a tool because it holds separate things together. A stone weight is a tool because it keeps a covering in place. A wooden peg is a tool because it fixes movement to the ground. A prepared sleeping surface is a tool because it stands between skin and cold earth. These things may not be as visible as a stone flake, but they may have shaped daily life in a very direct way. Sleep, warmth, recovery, and safety all depend on small protections. Without them, the body spends more energy fighting the environment even when it is supposed to be resting. Clothing and shelter also connect the tool story to new landscapes. A body with better covering can remain longer in colder air. A body with a windbreak can rest where open ground would be harsher. A group with tied materials can carry parts of protection from one place to another. This does not mean early humans suddenly conquered every climate or lived comfortably everywhere. That would be too simple. It means that tools helped soften the edge between body and place. They made certain environments a little more usable, one covering, one cord, one support, and one sheltered pause at a time. By the end of this stage, the answer to what the first tools humans ever made were has become broader again. They were not only stones for force, flakes for cutting, sticks for reach, bones for piercing, shells for scraping, or fire tools for heat. They were also the quiet objects that made covering, tying, sleeping, resting, and staying possible. A scraper prepared hide. A point opened holes. A cord joined loose things. A frame held space. A stone weight resisted wind. Together, these tools helped create a small, protected boundary around the human body. And from that boundary, the story now moves toward another deep change. The ability to carry more than the hands could hold. Carrying tools changed human life. Because the hands are useful, but they are few. 2 hands can hold only so much. A person can grip a stone, carry a branch, lift food, hold a child, or protect the body, but not all of these at once. The body has strength, but strength alone does not solve the problem of keeping things together while moving. This is where containers, cords, bags, baskets, slings, hide wraps, gourds, bark vessels, and carrying frames enter the long story of tools. They did not cut like flakes. They did not strike like hammerstones. They did not reach like sticks. Instead, they changed what could travel with the body. A container is a quiet kind of tool, but it may be one of the most important. It turns scattered things into one thing that can be moved. Seeds, nuts, roots, shellfish, stones, dry fuel, small tools, pigments, water, fibers, and pieces of food can be gathered into a form the hands can manage. Without a container, many useful things must be left behind because they are too small, too loose, too many, or too awkward to carry. With a container, the body gains a new kind of memory. It can keep what was found in one place and bring it to another. A hide bag, woven basket, bark packet, shell, gourd, wooden bowl, or folded skin, each answers the same basic problem. How can the hand hold more than the hand can close around? Many early carrying tools would have been made from fragile materials. Plant fibers, bark, leaves, skins, sinew, and woven grasses rarely survive from very deep time, unless conditions are unusually kind. This means the history of carrying is partly hidden. Stone tools remain visible, but a basket can vanish, a cord can decay, a skin bag can rot, a wooden vessel can break down into soil. Yet the usefulness of these tools is easy to understand because the need is universal. A moving body must decide what to take and what to leave. Carrying tools change that decision. They allow food to be gathered for later, fire materials to be moved, water to be transported when a suitable vessel exists, and smaller tools to stay together rather than disappear across the ground. Cordage may be even more important than it first appears. A cord is simple, but it allows joining. It can tie a bundle, close a bag, hang a container, fasten a tool, repair a covering, bind a shelter frame, or help carry weight. Once binding exists, the world changes. Loose things can become bundles. Separate pieces can become one working object. A tool can have a handle, a load can be balanced, a covering can be tightened around the body. A trap, net, sling, or woven form becomes possible in later traditions. We should not claim exact dates for the first cord, because soft fibers vanish easily, but the logic of carrying and binding belongs deeply within human tool history. It turns movement into planning. Containers also change the relation between people and time. A cutting edge helps in the present moment. A hammerstone helps with immediate force, but a basket or bag helps with later. It allows something found now to matter somewhere else, or sometime after the finding. This is a different kind of power. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, but it makes daily life more organized. The first tools humans ever made were not only things that acted on the world, some of them helped the world travel with the body. A bag made distance smaller. A cord made loose things stay together. A basket made many small items into one load. A vessel made carrying possible where the hand alone would fail. In this quiet way, carrying tools expanded the human body without changing its bones. They gave the hands a memory outside themselves, and they helped early human life move from momentary use towards storage, return, and preparation. A carrying tool may look passive because it does not strike, cut, scrape, or pierce. But in the long story of human life, carrying may be just as important as making. A sharp flake helps when the hand meets a surface. A spear or pointed shaft helps when the body needs distance. A scraper helps when a hide must be prepared. But a basket, bag, cord, or vessel helps after the immediate action is over. It keeps the result from being lost. It allows gathered food to move away from the place where it was found. It allows small tools to travel together. It allows useful stones, dry wood, fibers, shells, pigments, bones, seeds, roots, or pieces of meat to remain with the group instead of being scattered across the ground. This is a quiet kind of power. It does not change the shape of the hand. It changes what the hand can keep. A bag made from hide, a net made from fiber, a basket made from reeds or grasses, a bark container, a wooden bowl, a shell used as a small cup, or a gourd used as a vessel, all answer one deep problem. The human body finds more than it can hold. 2 hands are quickly filled, arms tire, fingers lose small things. A person moving through a landscape may need to carry food, tools, fire material, water, children, coverings, or gathered plants. Without containers, each useful object competes for the same limited grip. With containers, the body can collect many small things and treat them as one load. That changes movement. It changes planning. It changes how a place can be used because what is found there no longer has to remain there. Cordage sits at the center of this change. A cord may seem even simpler than a basket, but it is one of the most powerful forms of toolmaking because it creates connection. A cord can close a bag. It can tie a bundle of sticks. It can fasten hide around the body. It can bind a shelter frame. It can attach a stone, bone, or shell piece to a handle. It can help make a sling, net, trap, carrying strap, or woven container in later traditions. The first cords are difficult to see in the oldest evidence because plant fiber, sinew, and hide strips decay so easily. But without some form of tying and binding, Many later tools would not work as complete objects. A point needs attachment, a covering needs fastening, a bundle needs tension, a container needs structure. In this way, cordage turns separate pieces of the world into a temporary whole. Carrying tools also changed the meaning of distance. A stone flake used in one place may be left behind when the task is finished, but if someone can carry it, it may become useful again somewhere else. A group that can carry dry fuel can move fire more easily in certain contexts. A person who can carry seeds, nuts, or roots can bring gathered food back to a safer resting place. A vessel that can hold liquid changes how the body relates to water, though the earliest durable water containers are difficult to trace clearly because many possible materials vanish. A basket can turn many tiny items into a single object. A strap can move weight from the hands to the shoulder, back, or head. These changes are not dramatic, but they matter because human life is not only made of moments of action, it is made of returning, storing, sharing, waiting, and preparing. In the wider answer to what the first tools humans ever made were, carrying tools remind us that technology is not only about touching the world with more force, it is also about holding on to what the world gives. A container gathers, a cord connects, a strap supports, a bundle preserves order, a vessel carries what would otherwise spill away. These tools helped humans move through landscapes with more than the body alone could manage, and they quietly opened the path towards storage, settlement, trade, memory, and the long human habit of bringing part of one place into another. Carrying tools bring us to a quiet turning point in the history of human making. At first, a tool helped the body act. A stone struck, a flake cut, a stick reached, a bone point pressed. A scraper worked a surface. But a container did something different. It helped the body keep. That difference may seem small, but it reaches deep into human life. To keep something is to make the present last a little longer. A handful of seeds can be eaten at once or placed in a pouch. A few sharp flakes can be left behind or gathered in a wrap. Dry sticks can remain scattered on the ground or be bundled and carried toward a place where fire may be needed. A strip of hide, a woven basket, a bark packet, a shell cup, a gourd, a wooden bowl, or a tied bundle all share the same quiet purpose. They make loose things stay together while the body moves through space. This is why carrying tools belong among the most important early answers to what the first tools humans ever made were. They did not look like weapons. They did not shine like metal. They may not have left much evidence in the oldest ground. But they changed the relation between people and landscape. A place no longer gave only what could be used immediately. It could give something that travelled. Food gathered in one area could be brought to another. Useful stone could be carried away from the place where it was found. Shells, pigments, fibres, bones, roots, fuel, and small objects could remain available after the moment of discovery had passed. A container made distance less final. A cord made separate pieces behave as one. A strap allowed weight to shift from the fingers to the shoulder, back, or head. A bundle allowed the body to move without losing order. These were practical changes, but they also shaped time. Carrying tools allowed later use. They made return possible. They let a group bring material from one place to another and make decisions beyond the immediate need of the hand. We should be careful not to claim exact beginnings for baskets, bags, cords, or vessels. Many were probably made from materials that decay easily, and the earliest clear evidence is often much younger than the first use may have been. But the function is so basic that it must be placed close to the center of tool history, without carrying. Many other tools remain trapped in the place where they are made. Without binding, many combined tools cannot hold together. Without containers, gathered materials become difficult to store, share, or move. The stone flake answers the problem of cutting. The wooden shaft answers the problem of distance. The scraper answers the problem of surface. The container answers the problem of keeping many things inside one human journey. This also prepares the way for later changes in human life. Once people could carry more, they could gather more varied materials. Once they could bind more, they could make more complex objects. Once they could store more, even briefly, the body's relationship with hunger, movement, rest, and return began to change. It would be wrong to jump too quickly from a simple basket to farming, villages, trade, or cities. Those later developments had many causes and appeared differently across the world, but the thread is visible. A pouch, a cord, a basket, and a vessel are early forms of organization. They hold matter together. They help memory become physical. They turn scattered pieces of the world into something a human body can take along. So the first tools were not only about strength, sharpness, heat, or protection. They were also about carrying the world forward, one small load at a time. When humans began to rely more heavily on plants that could be tended, gathered in season, stored, and eventually cultivated in different parts of the world, tools entered another stage. The older tools did not disappear. Stone still cut, wood still reached and dug. Bone, shell, and fibre still helped with small work, binding, carrying, and protection. But the growing importance of plants, seeds, roots, and soil brought new pressure onto the hand. The body was no longer only moving through a landscape and taking what could be found along the way. In some places, over long periods, people began to return to certain plants, clear certain spaces, loosen certain soils, harvest certain grasses, and keep certain seeds. This did not happen everywhere at once, and it did not happen in one simple step. But where plant cultivation grew, tools had to answer a new problem. How could the body work not only with one object or one animal, but with a season, a patch of ground, and a future harvest? One of the simplest tools in this world was still the digging stick. It was already useful before agriculture, but in plant-focused life it gained a larger role. A pointed wooden tool could loosen soil, open small holes, lift roots, break crusted ground, or help place seeds. It did not need to be metal. It did not even need to be complex. Its power came from pressure directed through a point. Fingers can place seeds, but they cannot easily work hard soil for long. A digging stick allowed the shoulder, arm, and weight of the body to press into the earth without sacrificing the hand itself. In that way, one of the oldest kinds of tool became part of a much later change in human history. The same body that once used a stick to search the ground could now use a similar form to shape the ground more deliberately. Cutting tools also changed as harvesting became more important. A sharp flake can cut a stem, a shell edge can scrape or slice softer material. Later, sickle-like tools with stone blades set into handles made harvesting grasses and cereals more efficient in some regions. These tools were not just larger knives. They answered the problem of repetition. One plant stem can be cut by hand. Many stems require rhythm, edge, grip, and endurance. A harvesting tool allowed the hand to repeat the same movement many times without using teeth, nails, or bare fingers against tough stalks. Over time, such tools helped gather plant food in larger amounts, especially when people depended more on seasonal abundance. Grinding tools also became central. Seeds and grains are small, hard, and often difficult to eat without processing. A hand can crush a few, teeth can grind some, but stones used for grinding and pounding changed the scale of work. A grinding stone, a handstone, a mortar, or a pestle allowed hard plant material to be broken down slowly. This was not quick work. It required pressure, repeated movement, and time. But it turned small hard seeds into softer meal or paste. It made plant foods easier to combine with water, heat, and storage. These tools were heavy, patient, and close to the ground. They show that agriculture was not only about fields, it was also about the long labor after harvesting, when food had to be processed before it could fully support life. Axes and adzes opened another side of this stage. In many places, clearing wood, shaping branches, cutting small trees, or working timber became more important as people built more lasting shelters, fences, handles, and cultivated spaces. Polished stone axes and later metal blades would make this work more powerful, but the basic need was older. Plants did not only feed humans. They also stood in the way, provided building material, and shaped the spaces where people lived. By this point, tools were no longer only helping the body survive one moment. They were helping humans work with repeated seasons. A digging stick opened soil, a sickle cut stems, a grinding stone changed seeds, an axe shaped wood, a storage vessel protected what had been gathered. Together, these tools helped turn landscapes into places of return, labor, waiting, and memory. Agricultural tools also changed the scale of repetition. A hunter might use a spear at a critical moment. A scraper might prepare one hide. A flake might cut one surface. But farming and plant processing asked for the same movement again and again: digging, planting, cutting, carrying, threshing, pounding, grinding, storing, and returning. This is why agricultural tools were not only about strength, they were about endurance. A hand can gather a few seeds, a family or group can gather more, but when plant foods become more central, the body needs tools that can repeat work across many hours, many days, and many seasons. A digging stick, hoe, sickle, grinding stone, basket, storage jar, axe, or later plough all help the body stay with a task longer than bare hands could manage. The hoe is a good example of this change. A digging stick presses into the soil through one point, but a hoe or hoe-like tool changes the angle of work. It lets the body pull, scrape, loosen, and turn soil with broader movement. Early hoes could be made from wood, stone, bone, shell, antler, or combinations of materials, depending on the region and available resources. Later, metal made such tools stronger and more durable in many societies, but the need came first. Soil had to be opened, weeds had to be disturbed, seeds or roots needed space, water and air had to reach the ground differently. The tool did not create agriculture by itself, but it made repeated soil work more possible. Harvesting tools answered another repeated problem. If people depended on grasses, cereals, reeds, or other plants that had to be cut in quantity, a bare hand was not enough. A sharp flake could cut, but a sickle-like tool gave the edge a more useful form for repeated harvesting. In some traditions, small stone blades were set into handles, creating a longer cutting edge. The handle mattered because it changed grip, rhythm, and safety. The cutting edge no longer had to be pinched directly between fingers. It could be guided by a shape made for repeated motion. This shows a larger pattern in tool history. As tasks became repeated, tools became better fitted to the body's rhythm. Grinding tools may have required the most patience. A seed is small, but thousands of seeds become heavy work. Mortars, pestles, grinding slabs, and handstones turned plant processing into a slow daily labor. These tools did not flash or move quickly. They stayed close to the ground, absorbing repeated pressure from arms, shoulders, and body weight. Their importance was quiet but enormous. They allowed hard grains, nuts, and seeds to become meal, paste, flour-like material, or softer food that could be mixed, cooked, stored, or shared. They also show that the history of tools is not only the history of invention, it is the history of work made bearable by repeated surfaces. Storage tools completed this agricultural world. A harvest matters only if it can be kept. Baskets, pits, skins, jars, granaries, bags, and sealed containers help protect food from moisture, animals, insects, and loss. Not all of these appeared in the same way everywhere, and different regions developed different storage traditions, but the function is clear. Storage turned one season's labor into future security. It made food part of time. A stone flake solved an immediate problem. A storage vessel solved a later problem. Together with digging, cutting, grinding, and carrying tools, storage tools helped humans live not only from day to day, but from season to season. This is another answer to what the first tools became over time. Not only extensions of the hand, but ways of holding labor, food, and memory across the year. Agricultural tools also changed the relationship between people and place. Earlier tools often helped a moving body answer an immediate problem: a flake for cutting, a stick for reaching, a stone for striking, a scraper for hide, a cord for carrying. But farming tools tied labor more strongly to certain patches of ground. A digging stick or hoe did not only open soil once, it made people return to soil. A sickle did not only cut one plant, it belonged to a season when many plants had to be gathered at the right time. A grinding stone did not only crush one seed, it waited for repeated use, often in or near places where people returned, rested, stored food, and prepared meals. This was a quiet but deep change. Tools were no longer only traveling with the body. Some tools began to anchor human life to a place. A heavy grinding slab is not easily carried over long distances every day. A storage pit cannot move with the feet. A field, once cleared or tended, asks for return. A fence, post, or irrigation channel in later agricultural settings belongs to a landscape that has been worked before and may be worked again. This does not mean that every farming community became fully settled at once, or that the transition from foraging to farming was simple. In many regions, people mixed hunting, gathering, fishing, herding, gardening, and cultivation in different ways. But agricultural tools clearly pushed human attention towards cycles: planting, waiting, guarding, harvesting, processing, storing, and beginning again. Each tool answered one point in that cycle. The axe or adze helped shape wood, clear growth, make handles, cut poles, and build more stable structures. The hoe loosened and disturbed soil. The digging stick opened small spaces. The sickle gathered stems. The basket carried harvest. The threshing tool, where used, helped separate grain from stalk. The mortar and pestle or grinding stone changed hard seeds into usable food. The pot, jar, basket, sack, or storage pit held the result against time. Together, these tools did not simply make food easier. They made the year more organized around work. They helped people turn sunlight, rain, soil, seed, labor, and patience into stored possibility. This is why farming tools must be included in the long answer to what tools humans made. They show that tools were beginning to serve not just the hand, but the calendar. A cutting edge helps in a moment. A digging tool helps in a morning. A grinding stone may serve day after day. A storage vessel may hold the memory of an entire season. The body still remained vulnerable. Crops could fail. Weather could shift. Insects, animals, drought, flood, and disease could still enter human life. Tools did not make the world safe, but they gave humans ways to work with longer patterns than a single hunt, a single meal, or a single fire. By the end of this stage, the tool story had moved far from the first stone in the hand, yet the old pattern remained. The body faced a limit, and the world offered material to answer it. Wood became a handle, stone became an axe or grinding surface. Bone, shell, and antler became points or digging pieces in some places. Fiber became baskets and sacks. Clay became vessels in later traditions. The first tools helped humans touch the world differently. Agricultural tools helped humans return to the same world again and again, shaping it slowly, season by season, until a landscape could hold traces of human labor long after the hands had rested. Metal did not replace the older tool world all at once. For a long time, stone, wood, bone, shell, fiber, clay, and metal existed beside one another, each answering a different need. But when people in different regions learned to work copper, bronze, iron, and other metals, tools entered a new stage of strength, repair, and repetition. Metal could be shaped by heat and hammering. It could become an edge, a point, a blade, a hook, a nail, a fitting, a vessel, or a part of a larger object. It could be resharpened. It could be melted and remade in some contexts. This changed the relationship between tool and time. A stone flake might be used and left behind. A wooden stick might break and return to the ground. But a metal tool could last, be repaired, be passed on, or become material for another tool. That durability gave human work a new weight. A metal knife or blade could cut with greater consistency than many earlier edges. A metal axe could bite into wood more deeply and survive repeated blows. A metal adze or chisel could shape timber, bone, stone, or other materials with more control. A metal hoe, sickle, or plough point could make repeated agricultural work more durable in many societies, though not everywhere at the same time. A metal needle, awl, or hook could bring precision to cloth, leather, nets, and small objects. These tools did not make human life easy. They often increased work as much as they reduced it, because stronger tools made larger tasks possible. More trees could be cut, more soil could be turned, more building could be attempted, more goods could be made, carried, stored, traded, and repaired. Metal gave the body more power, but it also drew the body into larger systems of labor. Metal also changed the making of other tools. A metal blade could shape wood into handles, wheels, boats, beams, bowls, carts, and frames. A metal awl could pierce leather more cleanly. A metal hook could help with fishing, fastening, lifting, or hanging. A metal fitting could join pieces that would otherwise loosen. In this way, metal was not only one more material, it became a tool for improving many older materials. Wood became more workable, leather became more easily pierced, soil became more heavily opened, stone could be carved, moved, or shaped in new ways. Farming, building, weaving, transport and storage all felt the effect of metal, but always through local conditions. Some societies used metal early, others used stone and organic tools for a very long time. Human history did not move in one straight line. Still, metal widened the possible forms of tools wherever it became deeply integrated. At the same time, another kind of tool was growing more important, the tool of movement. Boats, sledges, carts, wheels, roads, and later vehicles changed how far materials could travel. A basket lets a person carry more than 2 hands can hold. A cart or boat lets a group move loads far beyond the strength of one body. The wheel, where it was developed and useful, changed transport on suitable terrain. Boats changed rivers, lakes, coasts, and seas into paths rather than barriers. These tools did not cut or scrape, but they changed distance. They made stone, wood, grain, pottery, metal, cloth, and people move through larger networks. This is why the story of tools now begins to widen from the body to society. Early tools helped one body strike, cut, reach, carry, or rest. Metal and transport tools helped many bodies work together across distance and time. A blade shaped wood. A wheel moved weight. A boat crossed water. A nail held parts together. A plough opened soil. A measuring cord, weight, or marked object helped make work more regular. The first tools began as answers to the limits of the body, but by this stage, tools were also answering the limits of groups, villages, fields, trade, building, and memory. Metal tools also changed how carefully people could shape the materials around them. A stone edge can be sharp, but it breaks in its own way. A wooden point can be useful, but it wears down quickly. Bone and shell can be precise, but they have limits of size, strength, and form. Metal brought a different kind of obedience to the hand. It could be heated, hammered, bent, sharpened, cast, repaired, and shaped into many repeated forms. A metal blade could become thin and strong. A nail or rivet could hold pieces together. A hook could catch, lift, hang, or fasten. A chisel could cut into wood or stone. A needle could pass through cloth or leather with a narrow path. A saw could divide timber in ways that earlier tools could not do as easily. This did not make older materials unimportant. In many places, wood, stone, clay, fibre, leather, and bone remained essential. But metal made those older materials easier to work with, and it made tools more reliable across repeated tasks. A farmer with a stronger blade could harvest more consistently. A builder with metal fittings could join parts more securely. A craft worker with awls, chisels, knives, and needles could make finer objects with more control. The tool was no longer only an answer to a single physical limit. It became part of a chain of specialized work. This is also where tools began to show clearer social roles. Earlier tools could be made and used close to the place where they were needed. A flake could be struck from stone. A stick could be shaped from wood. A scraper could be made from shell or bone. Metal usually required more steps. Ore had to be found. Fuel had to be gathered. Heat had to be controlled. Someone had to understand smelting, casting, hammering, sharpening, and repair. This did not happen in one simple line across the world, and different societies developed metalworking in different ways. But wherever metalworking became important, tools increasingly depended on knowledge held by specialists, on trade routes, on fuel sources, and on shared systems of labour. A metal axe was not only an axe, it carried inside it a mine, a fire, a furnace, a hammer, a maker, and often a network of exchange. That made tools more powerful, but also more connected to society. Measurement tools also became more important as human work grew larger. A cord could measure distance, a mark stick could repeat a length, a balance weight could compare amounts. A calendar, shadow marker, or counting object could help organize time, labor, storage, or exchange. These tools may not look like tools in the same way as a blade or hammer, but they changed human action just as deeply. A knife changes how the hand touches a surface. A measuring cord changes how a builder sets a wall, how a field is divided, or how cloth is cut. A weight changes how goods are compared. A marked record changes what a group can remember beyond the limits of one person's memory. This leads toward writing, but writing should be treated carefully. It was not a first tool in the old physical sense. It was a later tool for memory. Counting, ownership, law, trade, ritual, story, and administration in societies that needed information to survive beyond spoken words. In the long answer to what tools humans made, writing shows the point where tools began to extend not only the hand, but collective memory. A stone flake holds an edge. A basket holds gathered food. A pot holds grain or water. A marked tablet, knot, tally, or written sign holds information. By this stage, tools had moved far from the first hard object held between body and world. Yet the same pattern remained. The body and mind reached a limit, and the world was shaped into something that could carry strength, distance, order, or memory farther than flesh alone. By the time metal, transport, measurement, and writing entered the tool story, tools were no longer only small objects held against the world. They had become parts of larger human systems. A blade could shape a beam. A beam could become part of a house, a boat, a cart, or a gate. A nail, peg, rope, or fitting could hold separate pieces together. A wheel could move weight over land where the ground allowed it. A boat could carry people, grain, stone, timber, metal, pottery, and stories along rivers and coasts. A measuring cord could make repeated lengths possible. A balance could compare value. A marked object could help memory last beyond a spoken moment. These tools did not all appear together, and they did not spread everywhere in the same way. Human history is not a straight staircase. It is a wide landscape of different paths shaped by climate, materials, food sources, rivers, animals, soils, distance, and human choices. But the deeper pattern is clear. The first tools helped the body act. Later tools helped groups coordinate. Metal made edges stronger and more repeatable. Transport tools made distance less final. Measuring tools made work more regular. Writing and marks made memory more durable. This widened the meaning of toolmaking. A hammerstone adds force to one hand. A cart adds carrying power to a group. A boat turns water into a road. A metal chisel lets timber and stone take more deliberate forms. A plough point changes how soil can be opened again and again. A loom, in later traditions, turns thread into cloth through rhythm and structure. A scale turns judgment into comparison. A written mark turns a thought, count, name, or agreement into something that can remain after the voice is gone. These are very different tools, but they all answer limits. The hand cannot carry a harvest alone. The body cannot remember every debt, boundary, measure, or season perfectly. The eye cannot make every line equal without help. The village cannot move heavy material without systems of support. So tools began to hold more than force and edge. They began to hold order. This is why metal and social tools belong in a video about the first tools, even though they came much later than stone, wood, bone, shell, fire, and carrying objects. They show what the first pattern eventually became. A sharp flake was an answer to material resistance. A digging stick was an answer to hard soil. A scraper was an answer to hide. A basket was an answer to carrying. A metal blade was an answer to repeated labour. A wheel or boat was an answer to distance. A measuring cord was an answer to uncertainty. A written sign was an answer to forgetting. The same quiet logic moves through all of them. The body meets a limit. The group meets a limit. Then a material form is placed between that limit and human need. By this stage, tools also carried inequality, labour, conflict, trade, and dependence. A stronger tool could help, but it could also demand more work. A road could connect, but it could also bring control. A written record could preserve memory, but it could also preserve power. A metal weapon could protect, but it could also harm. A tool is never only the object itself. It becomes part of the life around it. That is why the story must remain calm and honest. Tools did not make humans better in every way. They made humans more capable, more connected, more dependent, and more responsible for what they changed. From the first stone edge to the later metal blade, from the first carried bundle to the written record, the question remains the same. What happens when a fragile body learns to place the world between itself and its own limits? Modern tools can seem so far from the first stones, sticks, bones, shells, and cords that they almost feel like a different story. A machine does not look like a handstone. A computer does not look like a basket. A phone does not look like a flake of sharp rock. Yet the older pattern still remains beneath them. A tool begins when the human body, or the human mind, reaches a limit and places something between itself and that limit. The early hammerstone answered the weakness of the bare fist. The wooden stick answered the short reach of the arm. The basket answered the smallness of two hands. The measuring cord answered the uncertainty of the eye. Modern tools answer limits that are larger, faster, and less visible, but they still follow the same quiet logic. A machine answers the limit of muscle. It can lift, cut, grind, weave, pump, dig, print, carry, and repeat work beyond the endurance of a single body. A simple lever, pulley, wheel, or crank already begins this change. Later engines made the change far greater. They turned fuel, water, wind, steam, electricity, or controlled motion into work. This did not make the body disappear. People still designed, guided, repaired, fed, and depended on machines. But the center of effort moved outward. Work that once belonged to shoulders, hands, backs, and legs could now pass through gears, belts, blades, wheels, rails, wires, and motors. In this sense, machines are descendants of the hammerstone. They are not similar in form, but they are similar in function. They let human effort travel through matter and return with greater force. Optical tools changed another limit: sight. The naked eye can see much, but it cannot see very far, very small, or very faint. A lens, a telescope, a microscope, or a camera places shaped glass between the eye and the world. Suddenly distance can be brought closer. Tiny forms can become visible. A moment can be captured and held after it passes. These tools did not only expand work, they expanded evidence. They allowed humans to look at stars, cells, insects, surfaces, wounds, maps, and memories in ways the unaided body could not. The first sharp edge helped the hand touch the world differently. Optical tools helped the eye receive the world differently. Tools of time and direction changed movement. A clock, compass, map, calendar, sextant, GPS device, or marked route does not cut, scrape, or hunt, but it helps people know where they are, when to act, how far to travel, and how to return. These tools answer the limits of orientation and memory. A moving body can become lost. A group can forget a path. A season can arrive earlier or later than expected. A journey can stretch beyond what landmarks alone can hold. By turning time and space into signs, numbers, lines, and repeated measures, these tools made the world easier to share across many minds. Then came digital tools, which may be the strangest descendants of the first tools because many of them do not feel physical at all. A computer, a search system, a database, a calculator, a digital map, a translation tool, or an algorithm can hold, sort, compare, remember, and process information faster than a human mind can manage alone. They do not replace the old body. They depend on fingers, eyes, electricity, language, materials, and the long history of earlier tools. But they extend a different limit, not only the strength of the hand, but the reach of memory, calculation, communication, and attention. The first basket carried objects. A digital archive carries information. The first cord tied materials together. A network ties distant people, images, numbers, and messages together. The first mark helped memory last. A digital file makes memory move almost without weight. This is why the story of the first tools does not end in the Stone Age. It continues through every object and system that helps humans live beyond the immediate body. The forms have changed, but the need remains familiar. Humans are still soft bodies in a difficult world, still reaching for force, distance, protection, memory, and meaning through things outside themselves. The farther tools move from the hand, the easier it is to forget what they are still doing for us. A stone flake makes its purpose visible. It cuts because it has an edge. A basket carries because it has a hollow space. A spear reaches because it is long. But many modern tools hide their action. A machine may be covered by a casing. A phone may fit in the palm while depending on mines, factories, satellites, cables, electricity, and countless other tools behind it. A digital map may seem weightless, yet it rests on measuring devices, clocks, signals, screens, batteries, languages, and shared systems of trust. Modern tools often look simple on the surface, because so much of their complexity has been moved out of sight. This is not a break from the ancient story. It is the same story becoming harder to see. The first tools placed stone, wood, bone, shell, fibre, fire, and carrying objects between the body and the world. Modern tools place layers of machinery, information, measurement and connection between the body, and tasks too large for one person to hold alone. A factory tool extends repeated motion. A vehicle extends walking. A crane extends lifting. A refrigerator extends preservation. A light bulb extends day into darkness. A camera extends memory. A microphone extends voice. A written document extends an agreement beyond the people who first spoke it. A computer extends calculation and sorting. A network extends presence across distance. Each one answers a limit that older bodies already knew in simpler forms. Too heavy, too far, too dark, too much to remember, too fast to count, too fragile to preserve, too distant to reach. What has changed is scale. The same kind of need that once made a hand reach for a stone now makes a society build machines, storage systems, instruments, and digital tools. But scale brings responsibility. A hammerstone can break a bone or crack a shell. A metal blade can cut wood or harm a body. A machine can build, destroy, feed, pollute, heal, transport, or exhaust. A digital tool can remember, inform, distract, connect, confuse, or preserve. Tools are never only helpful by themselves. They become helpful or harmful through the life around them. This is why the long history of tools should not be told as a simple march from primitive to advanced. It is better understood as a widening circle of power and dependence. Early tools helped a body survive the immediate environment. Later tools helped groups manage food, shelter, distance, labor, and memory. Modern tools help entire societies move energy, information, goods, images, and decisions at speeds no ancient hand could have imagined. Yet the human body remains inside the circle. It still gets tired. It still needs sleep. It still feels cold, hunger, pain, fear, and loneliness. It still uses tools to soften those limits, and sometimes it creates new burdens while doing so. In that way, the first tools are not distant relics. They are the beginning of a question that continues every day. When we place something between ourselves and the world, what part of our life does it change? A sharp stone changed touch. A basket changed carrying. A hearth changed warmth and waiting. A plough changed seasons. A clock changed time. A computer changed memory and attention. The forms are different, but the pattern remains calm and clear. Tools began as small answers to the limits of the body, and they became large answers to the limits of human groups. They helped us reach farther, hold more, remember longer, work harder, and connect across distance. But they also remind us that human strength has always been partly outside the body, resting in the things we make, use, carry, repair, and pass on. When we return to the first question, after passing through stone, wood, bone, shell, fire, hunting, clothing, shelter, carrying, farming, metal, measurement, writing, machines, and digital tools, the answer becomes both clearer and more humble. The first tools humans ever made were probably not one perfect object. They were likely simple things that helped the body do what it could not do alone. A stone that added force, a sharp edge that separated material, a stick that extended reach, a bone point that pressed into narrow spaces. a shell that scraped, a cord that joined, a container that carried, and a place around fire that made heat usable without touching flame. Some of these tools survive in the ground. Many others may have vanished completely. The oldest evidence we can hold is not the same as the oldest action that ever happened. That is one of the quiet lessons of deep history. Time preserves some materials and erases others, so the beginning of tools is partly visible and partly lost. But the pattern is still there. A fragile body met a difficult world, and instead of relying only on skin, teeth, nails, muscle and memory, it began to place pieces of the world between itself and its own limits. That pattern continued through every later age. The first stone flake and the modern machine are not equal in complexity, but they belong to the same long human habit. A tool is a way of borrowing from the world. It borrows hardness from stone, length from wood, curve from bone, edge from shell, heat from fire, strength from metal, order from measurement, memory from marks, movement from wheels and boats, calculation from machines, and connection from digital systems. Each new tool answered a problem, but each also changed the life around it. A digging stick made soil more workable, a scraper made hide more usable, a basket made gathering more meaningful, a sickle made harvest more repeatable, a plough changed land and labour, a written sign changed memory and power, a machine changed the scale of work, a digital tool changed the speed of thought, attention, and communication. None of this means tools made humans simply better, wiser, or safer. Tools gave ability, but ability always carries responsibility. A blade can prepare food or harm a body. A road can connect people or carry control. A record can preserve truth or preserve authority. A machine can reduce labour or demand more of it. A tool does not decide its meaning alone. Its meaning grows from the hands, habits, needs, fears, and values around it. This is why the first tools are not only an archaeological question, they are also a human question. They show us that human history did not begin with greatness, but with need. It began with small acts of help between body and material. It began with the recognition, perhaps wordless and slow, that the world contained forms the body lacked: sharper edges, harder surfaces, longer reach, stronger containers, warmer centers, more durable memory. The educational value of this story is simple. When we look at tools, we are not only looking at objects, we are looking at the relationship between human weakness and human patience. We are seeing how survival often grows from modest changes repeated over time. The first tools did not need to be beautiful. They did not need to be named. They only needed to answer a limit. And after millions of years of changing materials, forms, and societies, the same question remains quietly beside us. When humans made the first tools, were they only changing the world, or were they beginning to change what it meant to be human?